Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. Pakistani activists have called on international community to take notice of Indian conspiracies in Gilgit-Baltistan. At a joint news conference in Islamabad, the representatives of different organizations from Gilgit-Baltistan said the Modi regime has been misleading the world through false propaganda. They said India wants to create a division in the region. In India, 2 more farmers from Punjab have died during protests on Delhi borders. More than 100 growers have lost their lives during 2 months of demonstrations against new farm laws. Meanwhile, Delhi police have filed 43 FIRs against the farmers over the Republic Day violence. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called on the international community to ensure Myanmar's military coup fails. In an interview, the UN chief termed the reversal of elections unacceptable. Meanwhile, Myanmar's military has ordered telecom companies to block Facebook services over opposition against the coup. Washington says it is disappointed by the top UN court's ruling that it can take up Tehran's case to overturn US sanctions. Criticizing Iran for casting the ruling as a victory, State Department spokesperson Ned Price said the court has issued a preliminary ruling, not a decision on the merits. Earlier, the International Court of Justice ruled it has jurisdiction to hear the Iran sanctions case. Over 1,700 people have died from COVID-19 in Mexico overnight, with the death toll crossing 161,000. In Pakistan, over 1,500 people tested positive and 31 died overnight as the death toll climbs to 11,833. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.26 million lives, infecting over 104.3 million people so far. And in cricket, Babar Azam and Fawad Alam is steering Pakistan to a steady recovery after the hosts lost 3 early wickets. The Green Caps have posted 145 runs on the board till tea break in their first innings of the second test against South Africa. The hosts won the toss and elected to bat first. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, the news in detail. Pakistan has called on international community to take notice of Indian conspiracies in Gilgit-Baltistan. At a media briefing in Islamabad, the activist from Gilgit-Baltistan said India wants to create a division in the region. Advocate Abbas says a particular group backed by India is active in anti-Pakistan activities in Gilgit-Baltistan. He said India also wants to divide Gilgit-Baltistan. Abbas said people of Gilgit-Baltistan will never allow Indian conspiracies to succeed. Mehdi Shah Rizvi's daughter Tayyiba Rizvi said anti-Pakistan elements tried to influence her father. In India, 2 farmers from Punjab have died during protests on Delhi borders. More than 100 growers have lost their lives during 2 months of demonstrations against new farm laws. Delhi police have filed 43 FIRs against the agitating farmers over the Republic Day violence. The police have also stopped a delegation of opposition leaders from visiting the protest site at Ghazipur. Meanwhile, the farmers' movement has escalated into a full-blown global war on social media. Meena Harris Lawyer and the niece of U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris and U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee member Jim Costa have joined the voices supporting the farmers. YouTuber Lily Singh, poet Rupi Kaur, rapper Ross, UK MP Claudia Webb and a host of others also sent out comments in solidarity. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has called on the international community to ensure Myanmar's military coup fails. In an interview, the UN chief termed the reversal of elections unacceptable and called for the restoration of constitutional order. Guterres expressed hope that Myanmar's military will understand that this is not the way to move forward. The UN Security Council is also discussing a possible condemnation statement. The US says it is disturbed by reports that ousted Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi was charged following the military's takeover. State Department spokesman Ned Price repeated a call for all detained in the coup to be immediately released. Earlier, police raided San Suu Kyi's party offices and filed charges against her. She has been remanded in custody until 15 February. The charges include breaching import and export laws and possession of unlawful communication devices. Meanwhile, the army has ordered telecom companies to block Facebook services over opposition against the coup. This comes as demonstrators gathered in Myanmar's second most populous city of Mandalay. The United States says no decision has been made on its troop levels in Afghanistan. Earlier, a bipartisan State Department report to Congress urged the Biden administration to slow the withdrawal. The report said Washington should not abandon the Afghan peace process but abandon the May 1st exit deadline. A Congress-appointed panel recommended that the number of forces should be reduced only if security conditions improve. It added withdrawing all U.S. troops could lead to civil war, destabilize the region, and revive the ISIS threat. In war-torn Afghanistan, half of the population is in dire need of basic humanitarian aid, but the increasing violence prevents deliveries. The EU Commissioner for Crisis Management reiterates call for a ceasefire between the Afghan government and the Taliban. Details in the following report. The Afghan government and the Taliban have been negotiating a political settlement in Afghanistan, but the increasing violence in the country has dashed hopes that the US-brokered peace process in Doha would reduce the conflict. Meanwhile, European Commissioner for Crisis Management Yannis Lenarchich called for an immediate, unconditional and comprehensive ceasefire, especially for smooth delivery of the humanitarian aid. He has visited Kabul to announce the EU will provide 32 million euros for humanitarian projects in 2021.
There are challenges with regard to the access for humanitarian work and supplies. But the international humanitarian community is working very hard on this, on improved access. It is important for all in Afghanistan, the government as well as Taliban and others, to understand that allowing for full and unimpeded humanitarian access is their obligation under international humanitarian law.
This year, even during the winter months, fighting has taken place around the country. Yannis Lenarchich said that the situation of internally displaced people in Afghanistan is a matter of urgency. There has to be effective action to address their needs. He called on the government and Taliban to form an immediate and unconditional ceasefire, allowing full and unimpeded humanitarian access.
We very much hope and call for immediate, unconditional and comprehensive ceasefire in Afghanistan now, because that would increase the chances for a success of the ongoing peace process. Continued violence diminishes, on the other hand, the chances for success because it obviously hardens the positions of the two sides. That's why we call for immediate ceasefire.
EU Commissioner says that 32 million euro funds are separate from the $12 billion over the next 4 years that foreign donors, including the EU, have pledged in November. Washington says it is disappointed by the UN court ruling that it can take up Tehran's case to overturn US sanctions. Earlier, the International Court of Justice ruled it has the jurisdiction to hear the Iran sanctions case. Criticizing Iran for calling the ruling as a victory, State Department spokesperson Ned Price said the court has issued a preliminary ruling, not a decision on merit. Price said the ICJ did not accept Washington's well-founded legal arguments that the case is outside the court's jurisdiction. He added the U.S. remains clear about the dangers posed by Iran's malign activities. Earlier, International Court of Justice President Abdul Qawi Ahmed Yusuf rejected U.S. objections, but said a ruling could take months or even years. A bipartisan group of U.S. senators has introduced a draft legislation to the U.S. Congress. They are proposing sanctions against Russia over the case of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. The group of 4 Democrat and 2 Republican senators reintroduced the Holding Russia Accountable for Malign Activities Act of 2021. The bill seeks to impose targeted sanctions against Russian officials complicit in Navalny's poisoning and imprisonment. The proposed legislation calls for an investigation if the Kremlin violated U.S. laws prohibiting the use of chemical and biological weapons. It also demands a report on the assassination of Russian opposition politician Boris Nemtsov. Turkey says it has neutralized 5 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in northern Syria, near its southern border. It says the militants attempted to infiltrate the area under its anti-terrorism operations, Peace Spring and Euphrates Shield. The National Defense Ministry said the militants were gunned down after they opened fire at the Turkish troops. Ankara holds the Kurdistan Workers' Party responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year conflict. Syria says its air defense systems have intercepted Israeli missiles in the southern region. The Israeli military has declined to comment. Syrian state media said the Israeli aggression targeted Quneitra Governorate. It reported no casualties but only limited material damage. Israeli officials previously said their forces struck hundreds of Iranian targets in Syria. Now we're taking you live to Islamabad, where Foreign Office spokesperson Zahid Hafiz Chaudhry is addressing the media.
During the last week, in brazen manifestation of state terrorism, the Indian occupation forces martyred 3 more Kashmiris in fake encounters and staged cordon and search operations in Taral and Pulwama areas. During the same period, over half a dozen Kashmiri youth were arbitrarily arrested in South Kashmir districts. Unabated, cold-blooded murders and brutalization of innocent Kashmiris are a clear manifestation of state terrorism to which unarmed Kashmiris have been subjected to for over 7 decades. The prominent Kashmiri leadership continues to remain incarcerated in Indian jails under inhuman conditions on false and fabricated charges. Meanwhile, the RSS-BJP regime continues its despicable efforts to change the demographic structure of IIOJK in clear violation of the UN Security Council resolutions and international law, including the 4th Geneva Convention. According to the Indian Ministry of Home Affairs, 3.38 million fake domicile certificates have already been issued till 25th of January 2021. The international community must take immediate cognizance of this dire situation in IIOJK and take practical steps to stop India from such illegal and inhuman actions. The world community must also work for expeditious resolution of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute in accordance with the UN Security Council resolutions and the aspirations of the Kashmiri people. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi received a batch of 500,000 doses of Chinese Sinopharm COVID-19 vaccine this week. The Foreign Minister thanked the leadership and the people of China for sending the gift of COVID vaccine to Pakistan to help fight the pandemic. The vaccine is being used to inoculate the frontline health workers as part of government's effort to save precious lives. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi and the US Secretary of State Anthony J. Blinken had a telephone conversation. The Foreign Minister congratulated Secretary Blinken on assuming his office. He underscored Pakistan's commitment to forge a comprehensive partnership with the United States based on convergence of interests on a whole range of issues. Highlighting the transformation in Pakistan, the foreign minister stressed that the government of Prime Minister Imran Khan had a new vision that placed premium on forging economic partnership, building a peaceful neighborhood, and enhancing regional connectivity. Foreign Minister Qureshi told Secretary Blinken that peace in Afghanistan through a negotiated political settlement was one of the fundamental convergences between Pakistan and the United States. Secretary Blinken recalled US-Pakistan cooperation over the years and noted that the two countries had a range of areas to engage on. He acknowledged the sacrifices of the people of Pakistan in the fight against terrorism. In the context of regional developments in the Daniel Pearl case, the foreign minister underscored that it was important and in the mutual interest that justice is served through legal means. The foreign minister highlighted the steps being taken in this regard. Foreign Minister Qureshi and Secretary Blinken agreed to remain engaged and work together on advancing the two countries' bilateral agenda and promoting common interests in the region and beyond. Kuwait's Assistant Foreign Minister of Asian Affairs, Ambassador Ali Suleiman Al Saeed, paid a 4-day official visit to Pakistan. The Assistant Foreign Minister held the third round of bilateral political consultations between Pakistan and Kuwait. The consultations centered on reviewing the entire spectrum of bilateral relations, collaboration on issues of mutual interest at regional and international forums, and possibilities for enhanced cooperation in other fields. Pakistan and Kuwait have a long-standing fraternal relationship marked by warmth between the leadership and abiding ties between the two peoples. Foreign Secretary Suhail Mahmood and Principal Secretary of Kenyan Foreign Ministry, Ambassador Kamu, held the third round of bilateral political consultations virtually between Pakistan and Kenya. The consultations covered the entire spectrum of bilateral relations, mutual cooperation in the multilateral fora, and issues of peace and security in respective regions. Highlighting the Prime Minister's vision to forge multifaceted cooperation with the African continent as part of the Engage Africa initiative, the Foreign Secretary underscored the importance of strengthening cooperation in the fields of trade, investment, air connectivity and port linkages, security and defense, and education and training. The first round of bilateral dialogue on climate change and science was held between Pakistan and the Republic of Korea in a virtual mode. The two sides exchanged views on issues of mutual interest and explored avenues for enhancing bilateral cooperation and engagement in the fields of climate change and science diplomacy. The discussions covered implementation of the Paris Agreement, the forthcoming conference of parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and avenues for possible collaboration in science, technology, and innovation. The 12th session of the Joint Economic Commission between Pakistan and Sri Lanka was held in virtual mode on 3rd of February 2021. The two sides discussed broad range of issues related to economic, trade, and investment cooperation between the two countries. Opportunities for cooperation in the area of IT were particularly discussed. Now let me also share with you that a petition has been filed in the Supreme Court of Pakistan regarding the Jodhpur incident where 11 Pakistani Hindus, including 5 children and 4 women, died in India under mysterious circumstances last year. The family of the deceased and the patron-in-chief of the Pakistan Hindu Council have pleaded that the ashes of the deceased have not been provided to the victim's family for performing the religious rites, shared their concerns hinting at the involvement of Indian agency research and analysis wing in the incident, and requested to ensure independent and transparent investigation into the entire process. India continues to remain evasive on this horrific incident. India has also not explained as to why the bodies of the deceased were hastily cremated without informing the High Commission for Pakistan in London, and why a post-mortem in the presence of Pakistan High Commission's doctor was not permitted despite repeated requests by the High Commission. India has also not shared the pictures of the crime scene, particularly before the removal of the dead bodies, the statements of the witnesses, in particular the neighbors, forensic report, and the detailed investigation report. Since the deceased were Pakistan nationals, the Government of India is obligated to fully cooperate with the Government of Pakistan, carry out a comprehensive and transparent investigation, and share the findings with Pakistan. With this, I thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions on these or other foreign policy related developments.
Well, that was Foreign Office spokesperson Zahid Afroz Chaudhry, where he said that Pakistan condemns the Indian atrocities in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. He also highlighted that international community should take strong notice of the Indian propaganda in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Well, now it's time to take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Over 1,700 people have died from COVID-19 in Mexico overnight, with the death toll crossing 161,000. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.26 million lives, infecting over 104.3 million people so far. Details in the following report.
The planet's fight against the new coronavirus is finally gaining momentum as studies show growing public confidence in vaccines, and with over 108 million doses administered already, the number of vaccinated people has exceeded the global infections tally. The UN's vaccine initiative, COVAX, has issued the list of countries scheduled to get their share from the initial 337 million doses. However, while mass immunizations rev up, the virus continues to claim tens of thousands across the globe, with the US being hit the hardest. The number of fatalities in the US has crossed 450,000, with the average daily deaths of 3,000. US Chief Medical Advisor Dr. Anthony Fauci says the war against the pandemic is just beginning.
We have to be concerned about the mutants. Viruses will not mutate well if you don't give them the opportunity to replicate in a very large way. Namely, if you have an open playing field for the virus, they will replicate and they will mutate.
Mutant variants first found in South Africa and Brazil have now been detected in Turkey as well. The UK has initiated the first ever trials to assess the immune responses if doses of Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines are combined in a two-shot schedule. If proved viable, the mixing could improve vaccine distribution. Meanwhile, though Britain witnesses a slowdown in the spread of the disease, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has warned the country cannot afford to let its guard down just as yet.
And though today there are some signs of hope, the numbers of COVID patients in hospital are beginning to fall for the first time since the onset of this new wave, the level of infection is still alarmingly high.
South Korean Prime Minister has ordered a revamp of social distancing guidelines. The country's 5-tier distancing system has faced a public backlash for imposing unfair restrictions and curfews on specific businesses. China has reported 30 new COVID-19 cases, slightly up from a day earlier, but still well below the peaks seen last month.
U.S. President Joe Biden and Senate Democrats have agreed to move swiftly to get the $1,400 stimulus checks to most Americans. White House spokesperson Jen Psaki made these remarks during a news briefing. U.S. President Joe Biden proposed a $100.9 trillion coronavirus stimulus for a country ravaged by the pandemic. but the Republicans are proposing to slash the package by more than half. The U.S. president has rejected the Republicans' $618 billion relief proposal, calling it inadequate. This coincides with the Democrats trying to invoke a budget reconciliation mechanism to pass the package without Republican support. But White House spokesperson Jen Psaki says the Democrats will try to make the process as bipartisan as possible.
During the conversation, the president and Democratic leaders also agreed to continue working to find areas of bipartisan agreement in an effort to integrate ideas and make the process as bipartisan as possible.
Pakistan is set to receive more than 17 million doses of COVID-19 vaccine in February under the UN-led COVAX initiative. COVAX is co-led by the WHO, the Gavi Vaccine Alliance, and the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations. Islamabad has already launched its nationwide immunization campaign after being gifted 500,000 doses by China earlier this week. Meanwhile, the virus has claimed 31 more lives and infected over 1,500 people overnight. This has pushed Pakistan's death toll to 11,833. The country has reported more than 550,000 cases so far, out of which almost 506,000 people have recovered. The health ministry says there are nearly 34,000 active cases in the country. In Pakistan, security forces have killed 4 terrorists in an anti-terrorism operation in northern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province's North Waziristan district. In a statement, the military's media wing said 2 soldiers were martyred and 4 wounded in the exchange of fire. It said the operation was conducted after forces observed the presence of terrorists in a compound in the Mir Ali area. The Inter-Services Public Relations said the troops faced heavy fire from terrorists the moment they cordoned off the area. It said the terrorists were involved in attacks on security force. The United Nations has warned of the worsening humanitarian situation in Ethiopia's northern region. UN Chief Mark Lowcock said this while addressing the Security Council virtually. Lowcock said further conflict in the country's Tigray region could trigger broader destabilization. He noted that the government controls between 60 to 80% of Tigray, leaving the rest for ethnic Amhara and Eritrean forces to operate in. Lowcock said thousands of people in Tigray still have not received help as the UN does not have unimpeded access. He said there were troubling accusations of sexual and gender-based violence in the war-torn region. The aid chief added the humanitarian situation will deteriorate if protection and aid were not quickly increased. SpaceX has successfully launched another set of Starlink satellites in the first of back-to-back Falcon 9 launches scheduled from Cape Canaveral. The rocket lifted off from Space Launch Complex 40 at the Space Force Station. Its payload of 60 broadband satellites separated from the rocket's upper stage 65 minutes later. The satellites can beam signals for high-speed internet service from space to paying customers around the globe. Another Falcon 9 rocket carrying a new batch of Starlink satellites will blast off from the Space Coast tomorrow. German startup Wingcopter has joined the race to offer COVID-19 vaccine distribution by air. The company is relying on its experience in remote areas like the South Pacific Ocean nation of Vanuatu. More in this report.
The imminent arrival of COVID-19 vaccines has renewed hope that the beginning of the global recovery could be right around the corner. With the first shipments already mobilized in December 2020, the logistics sector is geared up to meet the increased demands for medical resources. Drone technology startup Wingcopter has secured fresh funding to strengthen its position and is seeking to get shots into the arms of people in hard-to-reach places.
What's special about Wingcopter is that it flies extremely fast. We set the world record with a maximum speed of 240 kilometers per hour. It can fly very far, more than 100 kilometers, with one battery charge.
The company, based in Weerstadt, south of Frankfurt, is working on several trial projects for countries in Africa and Southeast Asia. It aims to scale up operations to deliver vaccines to millions of people.
Together with UNICEF, we already delivered vaccines to various remote villages and shortened the waiting period from hours to minutes. At the time, there were vaccines for children. The knowledge from then we can now apply to the COVID-19 vaccine delivery, and we know exactly what to do to deliver these vaccines much more efficiently.
Wingcopter was founded 3 years ago, and according to the company, it has received a total of $22 million, among others from Silicon Valley-based Explorer Capital and the German state of Hesse Growth Fund Futuri.
In Brazil, President Jair Bolsonaro and Uruguayan President Luiz Lacalle discussed the possibilities of a more flexible common market. Meeting at the Alvorado Palace in Brazil, the two leaders touted a flexible Mercosur that will allow member states to strike individual trade deals with third-party countries. Mercosur, also known as a Southern Common Market, comprises Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay and Uruguay. Talking to media, Bolsonaro termed Uruguay a partner and an important member of the Mercosur. Uruguayan President Lacalle said a flexible Mercosur will allow each country to advance.
We are in Mercosur and we are going to mark 30 years of the group. Just like any group, you need to review and change it. The next step in this modern world is to make it flexible so that each country can advance.
Now it's time to have a look at the weather update across the globe. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.